In the 14th century, in 1331, Ibn Battuta, the famed Moroccan explorer, perhaps the world's greatest traveler, he covered more ground than Marco Polo, arrived on the Banadiri coast in the same city we are seated in today. What he came across at the time was the wealthiest, most powerful city not only in East Africa, but some historians say the Indian Ocean trading system at large, which of course at the time was the centerpiece of the global economy. So if Rome was the king of the Mediterranean, Mogadishu certainly was the pearl of the Indian Ocean. When Ibn Battuta arrived, his ship was anchored off the coast. Large groups of young Somali men went out to greet him. They offered his crew food. They placed them under their protection, and they handled their business affairs for the entirety of their stay in Mogadishu. Such renowned hospitality invited traders, seafarers, merchants, admirals, and even royalty to these shores. And I think anyone who has been to Somalia will tell you that that hospitality has not been lost. These traders and merchants came from the Arabian Gulf. They came from Persia. They came from India, where I was born, hence the kurta. They came from Southeast Asia and even China. Constant exchanges meant that each of these places left an indelible mark on Somalia's language, dress, architecture, cuisine, aesthetic, and most curiously, Somalia's music. But how many of us know this history? The history of Somalia is one of the greatest multicultural crossroads in the world. We speak of crossroads like Turkey. We celebrate crossroads like Singapore. But why not Somalia? Somalia rarely enters the established narratives of history until 1991, which is to say it has no agency until it has collapsed. Africa at large has little to no mention or agency until it is either conquered or colonized, or until it has slipped into a violent state of affairs, which then immediately demands media coverage to fit what Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie calls the danger of the single story. But as we know, history is not a dead thing. Ivan van Sertima, the late great Guyanese historian who challenged the established perceptions and narratives of African history, said, quote, "History is not a mere accumulation of facts. It is the creation of a different vision, a different way of feeling, seeing, and believing. What happened in history, or what we think happened in history, affects our reflexes, our prejudices, our conception of ourselves, how we conceive of others, how we treat ourselves, and how we are treated by others." But we must not seek to revive this history, but rather to return to it, because it has been only a very small period in the grand scheme of human history in which the peoples, countries, and cultures of the global south, to which Somalia belongs, have not enjoyed status at the very apex of world affairs. To craft a route by which to return, we need not look back 700 years to the time of Ibn Battuta, as joyous of a journey as that was. But I would argue we need look back only 30 to 40 years, to the Mogadishu of the 1970s and the 1980s. This era was by no means perfect, but it was an era in which spirits were high and euphoria flowed in abundance, allowing for a musical and cultural revolution to take place, the likes of which I have never experienced or worked with before. We have to tell that story. I, first and foremost, am a storyteller. I began my working life as a journalist, but working on an international news desk where the news images and news stories of Somalia followed a tired and shallow portrayal, a portrayal that was unable to exceed past the bounds of this single story. This inspired me to do something different. It inspired me to tell real, palpable, vivid stories that breathe life into an already living history. There are many ways to do this. You can keep these memories fond and alive, as the great Nuruddin Farah has done through his novels. You can maintain libraries of Somali poetry, as a company in Stockholm, Sweden has done. Or you can excavate one of the greatest, most durable, most revealing time capsules and cultural artifacts we have, recorded music. In whatever format you might find it. Vinyl LPs, cassette tapes, master reels, these are the best, and even compositional notebooks. Once music is recorded, that's it. It is forever immortalized. A collection of these recordings forms one of the most revealing, a still water reflection of the social and political happenings of the day. You can quite literally feel history in music. Its ability to transport time and place is quite frankly unrivaled. I wanted to find a way to harness the power of music. So I started a record label, or a music company if you will, that seeks to capture and reveal to the world the music of misunderstood cultures. The cultures I have worked with, Haiti in the Caribbean, the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of West Africa, and now Somalia, have all experienced the same trauma. The trauma of displacement, the trauma of many having to forcibly leave their home. And a trauma of this nature and an exodus of this nature leaves one's international image fragile. And an international image, just as one's perception of history, determines a great deal of our confidence. The first and most enduring casualty of war, I believe, is the historical grandeur and the cultural backbone of a people. Restoring that, or rather returning to it, is as important, if not more, than any political, diplomatic, or military settlement. Our project to revive, compile, and make globally available Somali music from before the war is at the end of the day a human story. Our project seeks to humanize Somalia. My colleagues and I began researching Somali music on YouTube and the Somali language corners of the internet, where in recent years, vast amounts of music collections have been uploaded by people who understand the value of keeping these songs alive and keeping them alive in any way they can possibly do. This uploading of mass collections has actually been part of a greater trend in the last few years, of a greater reassertion of Somali identity that the world has seen. This trend has culminated into a movement which has led to the creation of archives, Somali music archives, that have been built to last. In Hargeisa, the Red Sea Foundation amassed and got together a collection of over 10,000 cassette tape recordings. The story of Somali cassette tapes is very interesting. A lot of these cassette tapes were actually dispatched to Djibouti and Kenya during the war to keep them safe. And one radio operator told me he even buried them deep under the ground so that airstrikes could not hit them, because he understood the value of these cultural artifacts. And we spent close to 1 month, 12 hours a day, immersing ourselves in this archive, digitizing a very large portion of it. Thankfully, for the sweet, spicy Somali tea, we could keep going. Immersing ourselves in this archive for as long as we did sent us on quite the journey. The most obvious revelation of this cellar of fine, aged Somali sounds was that it was quite simply incredible music, some of the best myself or my team had ever heard. Raucous rhythms, rugged horns, celestial synthesizers, and stalking bass lines came alive alongside majestic voices like Abdullahi Zulfa. Like Fadumo Qasim. Like Hibunura. These are, of course, just some of my favorites. This talk is too short for me to go into the vast and complex universe that is Somali music. The deeper revelations of this archive evoked the great memories of this city. It evoked the status of Somalia as an international cultural junction. It evoked memories of the Aruba, the Jazeera, and the Juba hotels, where youthful bands like Iftiin, Durdur, and Sharero serenaded cosmopolitan crowds. It evoked memories of the National Theatre, where Waberi provided unforgettable soundtracks. As you can see from this image, there are a great deal of women in the Waberi theater troupe, and this was perhaps one of the most potent reminders that this archive offered, was of the empowerment of women in this period of artistic endeavor. In comparison to neighboring countries like Ethiopia and Sudan, each of which has left their mark on Somali music is set apart by the prevalence of powerful and adored female singers. Female singers like Magul, like Fadumon Qasim, like Hibu Noura, like Marian Mursal, like Maria Nasir, like Sara Dawu, like Sara Ahmed, among so many more who are often more prolific than their male counterparts. The presence of female singers is inseparable from the evolution of Somali music. Qadra Dahir, who performed with both Waberi in Hargeisa and Mogadishu, told me that through music, women became the pride and joy of the public. Somali music of days long gone offer a compass through which Somalia can reclaim its rightful identity. It offers a compass through which Somalia can reclaim its rightful image and its rightful history. And even though we access one of the largest archives of its kind, we have merely only scratched the surface. And this then offers an absolutely wonderful opportunity. If someone has been seduced by the stereotypes of Somalia, and they find themselves dancing to Somali music in London, New York, Hong Kong, Tokyo, or wherever, there is a good chance that they will never view this place the same again, because now they will have to reconcile with the fact that the single misleading story they have been told about Somalia is being shattered by music of the very highest order, music they perhaps thought not possible in Somalia. In your parents' basements, or your grandparents' homes, or your aunts, or your uncles, or perhaps even your own and you don't know it, there are cassettes. There are old recordings. These sounds are across this city and across this country. They are in the hands of the diaspora, but the real treasures lie here. The more of those sounds that can be revived, restored, and disseminated worldwide will form the most potent weapon Somalia has in its long struggle to reestablish itself to the grandeur of the 14th century and the swinging city of Mogadishu from the 1980s and the 1970s. When the music of older generations is reintegrated into the Somali and global imagination, it will form the foundation by which Somali music can once again thrive. It can even give birth to a nascent Somali music industry. And when that industry is able to stand on its own 2 feet, I can safely assure you there are dance floors around the world that are eagerly awaiting these sounds. There are DJs around the world eagerly waiting to play these sounds. And there are live music venues eagerly waiting to book and host live Somali bands. So dig up, revisit, return to the music that so beautifully colors your rich history. Play those songs loud. Play them loud for yourself. Play them loud for Somalia. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.